Welcome back to Last Dictarine. Before we step into tonight's tale, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Now, let's lower the lights and slip into this evening's unsettling account. The matriarch once said, "We don't speak of the twins, and now I understand why." My grandmother's house always felt like it occupied its own separate sliver of reality. Tucked at the end of a narrow dirt road in rural Vermont, encircled by a thick forest of ancient maple trees, the three-story Victorian mansion stood with its weathered clapboard siding and sharply pitched gabled roof. Every summer as a child I stayed there, wandering its endless rooms, finding secret corners, and playing in the wide gardens my grandmother maintained with almost sacred care. But there was one room I was forbidden to enter, a locked bedroom at the far end of the third-floor hallway. Whenever I asked about it, my grandmother would tighten her lips into a thin line and shake her head. "We don't speak of that," she'd whisper, her voice dropping low. "Some doors are meant to remain closed." Naturally, being a curious child, the prohibition only fueled my determination to discover what lay behind it. During thunderstorms, I would press my ear to the heavy oak door, certain I could hear faint children's laughter drifting from inside. Once I even tried peering through the keyhole, but something had been wedged inside to block the view. When I questioned my mother, her expression darkened. "We don't speak of the twins," she snapped, then quickly changed the subject. It was the only time anyone had ever mentioned twins in our family, and those words stayed with me for years. After college, I moved away to build my career, and trips to my grandmother's house grew rarer. Life moves fast, sweeping you along until childhood mysteries slip into the background. But when my grandmother died last month at 97, I found myself driving back down that familiar dirt road, watching the dense canopy of trees close overhead once more. The funeral was small and quiet. She had outlived most of her friends, and our family had always been modest. Just my mother, my Aunt Catherine, and a few distant relatives I hardly knew. My grandmother had been the matriarch, the steady center that kept our scattered family connected. Without her, we felt like drifting satellites, slowly pulling apart. After the service, we gathered at the old house. It seemed smaller somehow, lessened by her absence. I wandered the room's floorboards creaking under my steps, trailing my fingers across dusty antique furniture and faded photographs. My mother found me in the library, staring at a portrait of my grandmother as a young woman, her face smooth, eyes bright with youth and possibility. "She left the house to you," my mother said softly, extending a thick envelope. Along with this, I accepted it. The envelope was heavy, sealed with wax impressed by my grandmother's signet ring. An intricate pattern of intertwined roses. Inside lay an ornate brass key and a letter in her careful handwriting. "My dearest Eliza, if you are reading this, I have left this world. The house is now yours, together with all its secrets. I have carried this weight too long, and I cannot take it with me. The key will open the locked room on the third floor. What you discover there may unsettle you, but I believe you have the right to know the truth about our family. The twins were born in the summer of 1952. Your grandfather and I were overjoyed. Twins had not appeared in our line for generations. But joy quickly turned to despair. Something was wrong with them from the start. Something I still cannot fully describe. We did what we believed was necessary at the time. Perhaps it was wrong. Perhaps we should have sought help. But fear and shame can push people toward terrible choices. I have kept their room exactly as it was. Some may call it morbid, but I could never erase them entirely. They were still my children. Forgive me, Eliza, and be cautious. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. With eternal love, grandmother. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking harder each pass. The key felt unnaturally cold in my palm, as though it had been kept away from light for decades. Which, I supposed, it had. My mother watched from the doorway, worry etched on her face. "What does it say?" she asked. I hesitated, then folded the letter and tucked it away. "Nothing important." I lied. "Just some notes about the house." That night, after everyone had gone and the house settled into its familiar creaks and sighs, I stood at the base of the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. The key rested heavy in my pocket. Part of me wanted to discard it, to honor my grandmother's lifetime of silence, but curiosity has always been my weakness. The 3rd floor hallway was dark, lit only by moonlight through a small window at the far end. Floorboards groaned beneath me as I moved past dusty paintings and draped furniture. When I reached the locked door, I paused, hand hovering over the knob. Was I truly prepared to uncover a secret buried for over 70 years? Before doubt could stop me, I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, almost eagerly, as though regularly maintained. The door opened on silent hinges, revealing a room washed in silver moonlight. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness. It was a nursery, frozen in time. 2 identical cribs stood against the far wall, white paint yellowed by age. A rocking chair waited in the corner, a knitted blanket draped over its arm. Wooden blocks, cloth dolls, tin soldiers sat neatly arranged on shelves and tables, waiting for hands that would never return. The air was stale but not unpleasant, carrying faint lavender and something unplaceable. I stepped inside, half expecting the laughter I had imagined as a child. But the room stayed silent, guarding its secrets. On the dresser between the cribs sat a silver, framed photograph. I lifted it, brushing away dust with my thumb. It showed my grandmother, much younger, holding 2 infants in matching blankets. She smiled, yet even in the faded image, I could see strain in her eyes, tension in her shoulders. I set the photo down and moved to the cribs. They were empty except for small handmade quilts embroidered with names, Theodore and Theodora. I traced the stitching, feeling a strange connection to these unknown relatives who shared my blood but not my time. Something caught my attention, a journal on the nightstand beside the rocking chair. The leather cover was cracked from age, pages yellowed and fragile. I opened it carefully to the first entry, dated June 15, 1952. Today I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The labor was long and difficult. At times I feared I would not survive. But they are here now, and they are perfect. Theodore and Theodora, my beautiful children. The handwriting was my grandmother's, though less steady than the precise script I knew. I turned the page. June 20th, 1952. Something is wrong with the twins. They cry without pause, but not like ordinary babies. It's more like screaming. The doctor says it's only colic, that it will pass. But there is something in their eyes when they look at me. Something knowing. It frightens me, though I'm ashamed to admit it. The entries grew darker with each page. My grandmother described how the twins developed at an unnatural pace. Sitting up, speaking words at only 3 months. How they whispered to each other in a language no one understood. How pets and small animals near the house began to vanish, only for the twins to be found playing with bones and fur. September 3rd, 1952. I caught Theodora standing over Theodore's crib last night, pressing a pillow to his face. When I screamed, she turned to me with such hatred in her eyes. She is only 3 months old. It is impossible. And yet, September 10th, 1952. Harold wants to take them to specialists in Boston. I agreed, but secretly I am terrified of what the doctors might discover. What if they take my babies away? Despite everything, they are still my children. I still love them. God help me, I do. The writing became more frantic, more desperate. She wrote of strange events in the house, objects moving on their own, voices whispering from empty rooms, shadows shifting against the light, and always the twins at the center, watching with identical dark eyes. November 28, 1952. Harold does not believe me. He says I am suffering postpartum psychosis. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps I am losing my mind. But I know what I saw last night. I know what I heard. I woke to singing. A woman's voice, soft and sweet, coming from the nursery. When I went to check, I found the twins standing in their cribs, holding hands through the bars, eyes closed. The singing came from above them, but no one else was in the room. When they sensed me, they opened their eyes together. "Grandmother is coming," they said in unison. "She wants to play with us." My grandmother has been dead for 12 years. My hands trembled so badly I could barely turn the pages. The next entry, dated nearly a month later, was written in jagged, hurried script. December 24th, 1952. Harold is dead. They killed him. I know they did, though the police call it an accident. He fell down the stairs, broke his neck. But I heard them giggling afterward. I heard them say, "One down. I cannot stay here. I cannot leave them alone. They are my children. My responsibility. God forgive me for what I am about to do." The final entry was dated Christmas Day, 1952. It is done. May God have mercy on my soul. I closed the journal, mind reeling. What had my grandmother done? What had become of the twins? If they had died, why were they not buried in the family plot beside my grandfather? I needed more answers, and I knew where to look. The attic had always been forbidden when I was young. Another locked space in a house full of secrets. The narrow staircase was concealed behind a panel in the hallway closet, designed to blend perfectly with the wall. I found it easily. Some memories never fade. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, flashlight beam cutting through layers of dust and cobwebs. The attic stretched the full length of the house, its ceiling following the steep roofline. Trunks and boxes stood in orderly rows, each labeled in my grandmother's handwriting: Christmas decorations 1960s, Harold's clothes, family photographs pre-1950. I moved deeper, scanning labels until I found a trunk marked simply TNT 1952. The trunk was locked, but my grandmother's key fit perfectly. Inside lay more journals, medical records, and a stack of photographs tied with twine. I sat on the dusty floor and began to read. The medical records came from a private sanitarium in Switzerland. Admission forms for 2 children, Theodore and Theodora Montgomery, dated January 3, 1953. Diagnosis for both severe psychopathy with homicidal tendencies. Treatment notes spanned years, documenting therapies and medications, all apparently ineffective. The final entry, dated December 1960, reads simply, "Patients deceased following unsuccessful experimental treatment." I set the records aside and untied the photographs. They showed the twins at different ages, infants, toddlers, children of 8 or 9. Early images looked ordinary, chubby, cheeked, innocent. But later photos carried something deeply disturbing. Nothing obvious, just the eyes, empty and ancient, like staring into a bottomless well. The final photograph showed them standing side by side in what appeared to be a hospital room, wearing matching white gowns, holding hands, faces blank. On the back, in my grandmother's hand, the last photograph. "May they find peace." Had my grandmother sent her own children away? Had she committed them for 8 years before an experimental treatment killed them? It seemed unthinkable, yet the evidence lay before me. I was about to close the trunk when I noticed something else at the bottom, a small leather bound volume different from the journals, older, cover worn smooth from handling. Opening it, I realized it was not a book, but a collection of preserved newspaper clippings between tissue, thin pages. The clippings dated to the early 1900s, each recording a similar pattern: twins born to women in our line, followed by unexplained deaths, mysterious illnesses, or the twins vanishing under suspicious circumstances. The pattern repeated every few generations. Always twins, always tragedy. The final clipping, from a local paper dated December 26, 1952, was my grandfather's obituary. It mentioned his surviving wife and infant twins, but no reference to my mother, who would have been 5 at the time. I checked other journals for any mention of my mother and found one entry from 1950. Margaret turns 3 today. She is such a joy, normal, healthy, everything a child should be. I thank God every day that she was not born a twin. Perhaps the curse has skipped a generation. A curse. What was my grandmother referring to? And if my mother was 5 when the twins were born, why had she never spoken of siblings? I needed to speak with my mother. I gathered the journals, records, and photographs, stuffing them into a canvas bag I found hanging nearby. As I turned to leave, my flashlight caught something in the far corner. An unexpected door, small, barely 4 feet high, set into the sloped ceiling. It looked newer than the surrounding structure, wood less weathered, hinges less rusted. No lock, only a simple latch. Common sense told me to leave it, to take what I had and go. But I had come too far to stop. I lifted the latch. The space beyond was dark, the air noticeably colder. My flashlight revealed a small room with sharply angled ceiling, empty except for 2 child-sized rocking chairs facing each other in the center. Painted white, pink cushions faded. As the beam swept the room, I saw markings on walls, floor, and ceiling, an intricate pattern that seemed to shift and twist in the light. The symbols were unfamiliar, angles painful to follow, curves bending impossibly. They gave me a deep unease, as though they were words no human mouth should speak. A sudden noise behind me made me spin around. The door had swung shut, though no breeze could explain it. I lunged for the handle. It wouldn't move, held by some unseen force. Panic rising, I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try it burst open, sending me sprawling onto the attic floor. I scrambled up and ran, not stopping until I reached the main staircase, breath ragged. I needed answers now. I found my mother in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of cold tea. She looked up, eyes widening at the canvas bag in my white, knuckled grip. "You've been in the attic," she said. It wasn't a question. I dumped the contents onto the table. Journals, records, photographs. "Tell me about the twins," I demanded, voice shaking. "Tell me what happened to Theodore and Theodora." My mother's face drained of color as she stared at the spread items. For a moment I thought she might faint. Then she drew a deep breath and motioned for me to sit. "I was 5 when they were born," she began, voice barely audible. "I remember being excited to have a brother and sister, but from the start something was wrong with them. They didn't cry like normal babies. They just stared, watching everything, everyone." She picked up one photograph, finger tracing the twins' faces. Mother became obsessed with them, convinced they were evil. Father didn't believe her. He thought she had postpartum psychosis. He wanted to get her help, but she refused to leave the twins alone with anyone. She was terrified of what they might do. And then he died. "An accident?" I said softly. My mother nodded. "They said he tripped and fell down the stairs at night, broke his neck." But I was awake. I heard them laughing afterward. Theodore and Theodora laughing in their cribs. They were only 6 months old. A chill ran through me. What happened next? Mother took them away after Christmas. She told everyone they died of pneumonia, but she sent them to a private hospital in Europe. I didn't know where until years later, when I found some correspondence. By then they really were dead. Some experimental treatment went wrong, or so the hospital claimed. And the nursery on the third floor. She preserved it exactly as it was the day she took them away. She would go in there sometimes just to sit. She never let anyone else inside. I think she felt guilty. Despite everything, they were still her children. I hesitated, then asked the question burning inside me. Do you believe they were evil? Truly evil? My mother was silent for a long moment, fingers still on the photograph. I believe there are things in this world we cannot explain, she said finally. Things beyond our understanding. The twins were something else, something not quite human. The journals mentioned a curse. I pressed. Something about twins in our family. She sighed deeply. It's an old family legend. Every few generations, twins are born to the women in our line, and those twins are never right. They bring death and destruction. The only way to end the cycle is to... She trailed off, unable to finish. To kill them. I supplied, voice hollow. She nodded, a single tear tracing her cheek. Mother couldn't do it. She couldn't kill her own children, no matter what they were, so she sent them away instead. But the guilt ate at her for the rest of her life. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of the secret pressing down like something physical. Finally, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. You need to leave this house, Eliza, she said urgently. Sell it. Burn it down. I don't care. But don't stay here. The twins, their influence lingers. I felt it all my life, like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Promise me you won't stay. I promised. But even as the words left my lips, I knew I would not keep them. I had uncovered too much to walk away now. There was still a missing piece. That night I dreamed of the twins. They stood at the foot of my bed holding hands, faces blank. Play with us, Eliza, they said in unison, voices neither male nor female, child nor adult. Grandmother is waiting. I woke gasping, nightgown soaked with sweat. The room was dark, but I could have sworn I saw two small figures retreating through the door, hand in hand. The next morning my mother left early, claiming urgent business in the city. I think she could no longer bear the house, surrounded by memories and ghosts. I did not try to stop her. In fact, I was relieved to have the place to myself, to continue my search without her worried looks and quiet warnings. I spent the day searching remaining attic trunks for more about the twins or the supposed curse. I found birth and death certificates spanning generations, all following the same pattern: twins born, tragedy close behind, the twins dying young or disappearing. But in a hidden compartment in my grandmother's desk, I found the most disturbing item yet, a small leather-bound volume titled The Montgomery Family Grimoire. The book was handwritten in varying scripts, passed down and added to over generations. Its pages held rituals, spells, incantations. Many focused on protection against malevolent spirits and entities. One passage stood out. The twin curse has plagued the women of our line since Abigail Montgomery made her pact with the entity in 1723. Every third generation, twin children are born who serve as vessels for this entity's influence in our world. They appear human but are not. They wear the faces of innocence but harbor ancient malice. The only true protection is to end their existence before they fully manifest their powers, preferably before their first birthday. If this cannot be done, they must be bound using the ritual of containment, though this is temporary at best. The entity cannot be destroyed, only delayed in its purpose. The book detailed the containment ritual symbols, drawn in precise patterns, incantations spoken at exact intervals, herbs and minerals arranged in a protective circle. The goal was to bind the entity to a specific location, limiting its influence. With growing dread, I realized the symbols I had seen in the small attic room matched those described here. My grandmother had performed the ritual, binding whatever force inhabited the twins to that tiny space. But the grimoire warned that such bindings were temporary, needing renewal every 25 years. My grandmother had died just over a month ago. The binding would be weakening. As if to confirm my fear, I began noticing subtle changes in the house. Doors I had closed would stand open when I returned. Objects vanished, only to reappear in odd places. At night I heard footsteps in the hallway, rocking chairs creaking, childish whispers just beyond hearing. I told myself it was imagination, fueled by sleeplessness and disturbing discoveries. But deep down I knew better. Something was stirring in the old house. Something long bound and contained. I needed to renew the ritual before whatever was trapped in that attic room broke free entirely. But the grimoire cautioned that the ritual was dangerous for the untrained, potentially fatal if done wrong. I needed help. My Aunt Catherine had always been the family's outlier, estranged from my grandmother for reasons never explained. She lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by gardens of herbs and plants most would call weeds. Local children called her a witch, never to her face. Rumors said she practiced the old ways. I had always liked Aunt Catherine, despite rare visits. She had warmth my grandmother lacked genuine interest in my life and thoughts. If anyone knew about family curses and binding rituals, it would be her. I found her in her garden, kneeling among unfamiliar plants, gray hair in a loose braid. She did not seem surprised to see me. "I've been expecting you," she said, standing with surprising grace for her 70 years. "Come inside. We have much to discuss." Her cottage was as I remembered from childhood, cozy, cluttered, scented with herbs and wood smoke. Books lined every surface, spines cracked from use. Dried plants hung from beams, crystals caught window light. She led me to a small table by the window and motioned for me to sit. "You found the grimoire," she said without preamble, "and you've been in the binding room." I nodded, not asking how she knew. "The twins," I began. "We're never twins at all," she finished. "At least not in the way you think." She rose, went to a corner cabinet, and returned with a wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. From it, she took a stack of yellowed photographs, spreading them on the table like a macabre family tree. "These are the twins from each generation," she explained. "Look closely." I leaned in. Each photo showed a boy and girl at various ages, different faces, eras, clothing. But something was eerily consistent, something in the eyes, the blank set of their mouths. "They look related," I said hesitantly. "They look identical," Catherine corrected. "Not to each other, but across generations. The Theodore from 1952 looks exactly like the Thomas from 1903, who looks exactly like the Timothy from 1854, and the same for the girls. Because they are not different children. They are the same entity, born again and again into our family, wearing slightly different faces but carrying the same essence." I shook my head, struggling to process. "That's impossible." "Is it?" She tapped a photograph. "My grandmother's twins at about 5. Look at their eyes. Really look." I did, and a chill ran through me. There was something ancient in those childish eyes, something that had watched centuries pass, patient, calculating, utterly inhuman. "What are they?" I whispered. "We don't know." "Not really," Catherine replied. "The grimoire calls it an entity, but that's just a word for something we cannot understand. It made a pact with Abigail Montgomery in 1723, power and prosperity for the family in exchange for allowing it to incarnate every 3rd generation. Abigail agreed, not grasping what she had done. By the time she understood, it was too late. And my grandmother. the ritual she performed. Elizabeth was always the strongest of us. When her twins began showing their true nature, she researched the old ways, found the binding ritual. She could not kill them. They wore her children's faces, after all. So she bound the entity to that attic room, containing its influence. But the binding is weakening. I can feel it, I said. We need to perform it again. It's not that simple, Eliza. The ritual requires blood from a direct descendant of the twins. Elizabeth used her own as their mother. But now, I'm not a direct descendant. I realized. My mother is, but not me. Exactly. And Margaret would never participate. She spent her life running from this legacy. That leaves only one option. A cold weight settled in my stomach as I understood. Catherine, are you saying? She met my gaze steadily. I am Elizabeth's younger sister. We share the same blood. I can perform the ritual. But I will need your help. It's dangerous, Eliza. If something goes wrong, what choice do we have? I interrupted. If we do nothing, whatever is in that room will break free completely. Catherine studied me for a long moment, then nodded. We'll need to prepare. The ritual must be performed at midnight, when the veil is thinnest, and we'll need supplies. She rose and began pulling books from shelves, jars from cabinets. Take these, she said, handing me a list. Go to the old apothecary on Maple Street. Mr. Chen knows me. Tell him I sent you. I spent the afternoon gathering the items, rare herbs, specific minerals, candles of beeswax, and animal fat. Mr. Chen asked no questions as he packaged everything, though his eyes held a knowing sadness when I mentioned my aunt. By the time I returned to the house. My house now, I reminded myself. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. The house loomed larger in the fading light, windows like watchful eyes tracking my approach. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt thick, charged with energy that raised the hair on my arms. As I moved through the foyer, I could have sworn I heard childish laughter echoing from somewhere deep within. Aunt Catherine arrived just after sunset, carrying a large leather satchel, face set in grim determination. They know what we're planning, she said without preamble. They'll try to stop us. We worked quickly, preparing according to the grimoire's instructions. Catherine mixed herbs in precise proportions, grinding them while chanting softly. I arranged candles in the described pattern. A 5-pointed star within a circle, specific minerals at each point. As midnight neared, we carried our supplies in solemn procession to the attic. The house resisted. Doors stuck, floorboards groaned in protest. The temperature dropped sharply as we climbed the narrow staircase, breath visible in the cold. The nursery door stood open, though I had closed and locked it earlier. Inside, the room felt watchful, shadows deeper. Don't look at the photograph, Catherine warned as we passed. Don't look at anything too closely. Keep your mind focused. The attic stairs felt steeper, darkness more absolute. My flashlight flickered, beam weakening despite fresh batteries. Catherine produced an old brass and glass lantern from her satchel, its flame burning unnaturally steady. Oil blessed by a priest in 1842, she explained at my look. Some things cannot be corrupted. The door to the binding room was wide open, as if inviting us. Beyond, the two child-sized rocking chairs moved gently back and forth, though no breeze explained it. They stopped abruptly as we entered. The sudden stillness more unnerving than the motion. Work quickly, Catherine instructed, setting the lantern down. Draw the circle exactly as shown. I'll prepare the incantation. I sketched the complex pattern on the wooden floor, with chalk made from crushed bone and ash. The symbols felt wrong, angles painful to trace, curves bending impossibly. As I drew, I felt resistance, as though the floor fought the markings. Catherine stood in the center, reciting words from the grimoire in an unknown language. Her voice rose and fell in strange rhythms, sometimes a whisper, sometimes near a shout. The room grew colder, frost forming on walls and ceiling despite summer heat outside. As I completed the circle, connecting the final line, a shock ran through me like electricity. The symbols glowed pale blue, lighting the room brighter than the lantern. The candles, Catherine ordered, voice strained. Place them at the star points, quickly. I positioned the black candles at each intersection. As I placed the last one, Catherine began the final phase, drawing a silver knife across her palm. Blood welled, dripping onto the open grimoire. With blood of the line, I bind thee, she intoned. With words of power, I contain thee. By salt and iron, by silver and ash, I command thee to remain within these bounds until the appointed time. The symbols flared brighter, blue shifting to deep pulsing red. The rocking chairs moved again, faster, wood creaking in protest. The temperature plunged further, ice crystals forming in the air. Then came the voices, childish yet ancient, speaking in unison from everywhere and nowhere. You cannot bind us forever, daughter of Montgomery. We are eternal. We are patient. We will have what was promised. Catherine faltered, face pale in the eerie light. I moved to support her as she swayed. Continue the ritual, I urged. We have to finish it. She nodded, drawing a shaky breath. Final words to seal the binding. She murmured, turning to the last page. Her eyes widened. It's gone. The final incantation. It's been erased. I looked over her shoulder. Where text should have been was blank space, as though the words had been lifted clean from the page. How is that possible? I whispered. The book was locked in grandmother's desk. They've been planning this. Catherine realized, horror dawning. All these years they've waited, influencing events from within their prison. They knew Elizabeth would die. Knew the binding would weaken. They've prepared. The voices returned, louder, with childish laughter that raised goosebumps. Did you think we were helpless? Did you think we were contained? Foolish women playing with forces you cannot comprehend. The pact cannot be broken. The promise must be fulfilled. The symbols began to fade, glowing light dimming as the binding weakened. The rocking chairs stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, I heard a new sound, small footsteps approaching the door. We need the final words, I said desperately. Catherine, think. Grandmother must have left some clue. Catherine closed her eyes, brow furrowed. Elizabeth knew this might happen. She would have prepared a contingency. Her eyes opened. The music box in the nursery, the one that plays that eerie lullaby. Elizabeth always kept it wound, always made sure it worked. I thought it was sentimentality, but I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, ducking through the small door, racing across the attic. Behind me, Catherine continued the ritual, voice raised in defiance against the taunting children's voices filling the air. The nursery felt different now, air thick with malice, shadows more substantial. The cribs loomed larger, toys on shelves watching with invisible eyes. On the dresser between the cribs sat a delicate porcelain music box painted with children playing in a garden. I approached cautiously, half expecting it to shatter or vanish. But it remained solid. I lifted the lid. A tinkling melody began, the lullaby I recognized from my own childhood, notes slightly off, slightly wrong. Inside, on faded velvet, lay a small folded paper. I unfolded it carefully. One sentence in my grandmother's precise hand, to end what began, return them to where they first came. I stared at the words, trying to understand. Return them. Return who? The twins. But they were dead, had been for decades. And where had they first come from? A child's voice spoke directly behind me, so close I felt breath on my neck. She could never do it. She was too weak. But you're not weak, are you, Eliza? I whirled around, the nursery empty. The voice came again from the cribs. We've been waiting for you. We knew you would come back to this house eventually. Blood calls to blood. In the left crib, a small shape formed from shadow. Outline of a boy, about 8, dark hair, darker eyes. In the right, a girl identical except for longer hair. Theodore, I whispered. Theodora. They smiled in unison, expression never reaching their eyes. We've had many names, they said together. Many faces, but always the same purpose. What purpose? I asked, fearing the answer. To collect what is owed, they replied. A soul from each generation. Payment for the pact Abigail made. Prosperity and power in exchange for us. I backed away, clutching the paper. My grandmother bound you, I said. She found a way to contain you. Their laughter cut like broken glass. Temporarily, but bindings weaken, people die, and we are very, very patient. From above, I heard Catherine cry out in pain. The ritual was failing. Whatever contingency my grandmother had planned, I needed to understand it now. I looked at the paper again. To end what began, return them to where they first came. Where had it all begun? The pact Abigail made in 1723. The cemetery, the family mausoleum. Abigail was buried there. The cemetery, I said aloud. The twins' smiles faltered, forms flickering. You know nothing, they hissed, but uncertainty crept into their voices. I turned and ran, paper clutched tight, their angry cries following me down the stairs. Outside, the night was unnaturally still, moon hidden behind sudden clouds. I ran across the overgrown lawn toward the small family cemetery at the property's edge. The Montgomery Mausoleum stood at the center, a small neoclassical marble structure. The door was locked, but my grandmother's key, the one that opened the nursery, fit this lock too. Inside, stone sarcophagi lined the walls, each engraved with names and dates across centuries. At the far end stood a plain stone altar, set apart from the others. I approached cautiously, running fingers over its smooth surface. No engravings, no decoration, nothing to indicate purpose. But my hand passed over the center and felt a slight depression, a space meant for something to fit. Behind me the temperature plunged, frost forming on stone walls. I turned to see the twins in the doorway, forms more solid, more real. It won't work, they said, voices echoing in the confined space. You don't have what's needed. You don't have the grimoire. The grimoire, still in the attic with Catherine. Without it, I had no ritual, no words to end this. But as I looked at their smug certainty, realization struck. The final ritual was not in the grimoire at all. My grandmother had removed it, hidden it separately in the music box. Because the grimoire itself was part of the problem, part of Abigail's pact. I don't need the grimoire, I said, surprised by my steady voice. I just need to unmake what Abigail did. I placed my hand on the altar and spoke words that came unbidden, words I somehow knew were right. I, Eliza Montgomery, descendant of Abigail, do hereby renounce the pact made in 1723. I return what was taken and reclaim what was given. The debt is paid. The cycle is broken. The twins screamed, a sound of rage and fear that shook the mausoleum's foundations. Their forms dissolved, edges blurring, features melting into shadow. You can't, they shrieked. The price will be too high. I'm willing to pay it, I said, though I did not know what the price might be. This ends tonight. A wind rose from nowhere, swirling through the mausoleum, extinguishing my single candle. In sudden darkness I felt, rather than saw their presence weaken. the centuries-old grip on my family finally loosening. A moment of absolute silence. A heartbeat of perfect stillness. Then blinding light filled the mausoleum, so bright I shielded my eyes. When it faded, the twins were gone. In their place stood a woman in clothing from another century, face bearing strong resemblance to my own. "Abigail," I whispered. She nodded, sad smile on her lips. "You've done what I could not," she said, voice like rustling dry leaves. "You've ended it. The debt is paid." "What was the price?" I asked. "They said there would be a price." "Prosperity," she replied simply. "The wealth, success, privilege our family has enjoyed for generations, it's gone now. You'll be ordinary, Eliza. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. No special talents, no inexplicable luck, no extraordinary successes." I thought of what she meant. The Montgomery fortune built over centuries now vanished. The advantages I had taken for granted all my life, gone. But then I thought of the twins, the malevolence haunting my family for generations, the lives destroyed, souls corrupted. "It's worth it," I said firmly. Abigail smiled, genuine this time, reaching her eyes. "I thought you would say that. You're stronger than I was, stronger than any of us." She began to fade, form turning transparent. "The house will go too," she warned. It was part of the bargain. "Get what you need and leave before dawn." With those words she vanished completely, leaving me alone in the dark mausoleum. I made my way back to the house, finding Catherine in the kitchen, hands trembling around a cup of tea. "They're gone," she said. It wasn't a question. I felt it, like a weight lifting, a shadow passing. I explained what happened in the mausoleum, the words I spoke, Abigail's appearance. Catherine listened, nodding as pieces fell into place. "So it's over," she said when I finished. "Truly over after all these generations. But at a cost," I reminded her. "The family fortune, the house, everything." She laughed, a sound of genuine joy that brightened the kitchen. "A small price for freedom, don't you think? Besides, there are worse things than being ordinary." She stood, suddenly energetic. "We should pack what we can. If Abigail said the house will go, I believe her." We spent the rest of the night gathering what mattered. Family photographs, personal mementos, items of sentiment rather than money, the journals and records about the twins we burned in the fireplace, watching centuries of darkness turn to ash. As dawn approached, we loaded Catherine's car and took one last look at the house. In early morning light it already seemed diminished, less imposing, less grand, just an old structure slowly crumbling back to earth. We drove away as the sun crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the winding dirt road. In the rearview mirror I watched the house waver like a mirage in desert heat. Then, between one blink and the next, it was gone. Replaced by empty clearing, as though the Montgomery mansion had never existed. "Where will you go?" Catherine asked as we reached the main road. I hadn't thought that far. My city life felt like someone else's dream now. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Somewhere new. Somewhere without ghosts." She smiled, eyes on the road ahead. "That sounds perfect." We drove in comfortable silence, miles stretching behind us, carrying us away from darkness and toward something new. Something ordinary, and therefore precious. I don't know what the future holds now. Without the Montgomery fortune, I'll need to make my own way, relying on my own talents and effort, rather than inherited advantage. The thought is both terrifying and exhilarating. But one thing I know for certain, I will never face what my grandmother faced, what generations of Montgomery women endured. I will never look into my own children's eyes and see something ancient and malevolent staring back. I will never have to whisper, "We don't speak of the twins." The curse is broken. The cycle is ended. And that, I think, is worth any price. This is Last Dictarin. Thank you for joining me for tonight's tale. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with those who appreciate the darker side of life. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.